Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Sinco, the UX design lead on Android Studio.
I'm Sebastiano. I work as a UX engineer on the studio team as well.
And today we're here to talk about how to build IDE plugins with Compose with this thing we're calling Joule. But like we said, we're from the Android Studio team. And so before we talk about Joule, we actually want to give some background on how the UI is built in the IDE today. So this is Android Studio, which is based on the IntelliJ platform. And so we both, to build the IDE, share the same IntelliJ platform APIs, specifically in IntelliJ community. And really, everything you see in the IDE is kind of a plugin that's bundled or unbundled. And so, if you go to this link, there's ways to build your own plugin for the IDE. And really, it's kind of composed of three things. The first is the Gradle plugin. And so this gives you the build system, the dependencies that you need for the IntelliJ platform. And then there's, which is more of the bulk of it, there's the actual APIs. So when you're building your plugin, you have all the APIs to talk to the project system, talk to things like the editor, the tool windows, the action system, etc. And then there's the third layer, which is Swing. Yeah,
Hi, Ivan.
red. Hi, Ivan. Does anyone know Swing in here? Okay, well, that's actually less than the last time we asked this question.
Yeah.
Okay. So many of you probably got very rich off this lovely book. And it was written by two young gentlemen that we know today. But, you can use it in the IDE to build plugins, but do you really want to? There are a few problems. I think one, we're now in the year 2023, so the model for it's quite obsolete to build, I would say, complex UI. The second one is there's not much documentation. I mean, Swing was created before a lot of the before the internet, I guess, no? Related to that, though, there's not much of a community. So if you have hard questions about how to build a plugin, especially with really complex stuff, there's not really a great place to reach out to. The API didn't age well. Oh, you were going to say something?
No.
Okay.
No comment.
And then I think, more importantly, I think for us, within Android Studio specifically, it really prevents us from best practices when we're building UI. It ends up, when you're building Swing, can be very stateful, and you can't separate concerns very cleanly. And so that causes a lot of bugs, causes a lot of pain, headache, etc. So what about using Compose? Compose multi-platform specifically. So it already supports desktop. It does support iOS, though I think we're not recommending Joule for iOS. It does do web. It's experimental, but it does do web. It actually works already in the IntelliJ platform. So I think when Compose multi-platform first came out, there was a small sample that actually allowed you to build an IntelliJ plugin with Compose multi-platform. It is modern and easy to use. It's Kotlin. It's using Jetpack Compose. But why isn't it already being used in the IDE? The main problem is there's not really a UI toolkit for it. There is material design, so you can use material design for Compose multi-platform. But as you can see here, this is a little sample I wrote. We have a little material slider on the bottom. It looks fine. But then when you look at it in the IDE, it looks a little awkward. The touch targets are too large, and it doesn't quite fit in IntelliJ. This is a bigger example, kind of zooming out. So this is another experiment I had done where I was trying to build a replication of an internal tool. But the input field you can see is a beautiful material input field. There's some checkboxes, but the input field feels very large. It, again, doesn't really fit the IntelliJ platform. And so you can build your own components. So here is trying to rebuild the color picker with some smaller text fields to match the one we have in Android Studio. And then on the right, this is kind of a weird mishmash of, it is a desktop experience, but it also has some strange material theming in it. So it, again, kind of works, but doesn't quite work within the scope of IntelliJ. And so material design really can't be used in our use case because it's not optimized for desktop, and it really isn't consistent with the IntelliJ look and feel. And so today, that's why we're going to talk about Joule. So what is Joule? So Joule is a Compose for Desktop implementation of the IntelliJ new UI design system. The code name is int.ui, just to make it shorter. It's built on Compose Foundation. And if you don't know what that means, there is actually a talk from last year from Seb about how to build design systems beyond material for Compose. But it's utilizing the same concepts from that to build specifically for IntelliJ's design system. But it is limited to desktop, so we don't really recommend using these components on iOS. They'll look very strange. And like we said, it's based on int UI, so this is the new UI in IntelliJ and now in Android Studio. I guess show of hands, how many people have used the new UI? Oh, okay. Well, if you haven't yet, please give it a try. And if you hate it, you can always tweet at me. So
To the manager.
To the manager, yes. But if you use Joule, when we do use Joule within the IDE, it does support the new UI and it does support the old UI. And so this allows us to actually not have to rework everything. So every feature we do build will support both. We don't support the old UI as a standalone library because it's not something that IntelliJ or Android Studio is really going to continue evolving over time. But if you are building something within the IDE, then you'll know that it can be themed appropriately and you don't have to do anything. With that though, we wanted to also give a shout out to JetBrains as well, because Joule itself was kind of born out of a hackathon there from the Toolbox team. For those who don't know, the Toolbox app by JetBrains is actually built completely in Compose for Desktop. And so they were kind of one of the first teams that started to really use it in production. And so in our case, I think you were involved in that.
Yeah, in the hackathon.
Yes. But yes, Joule has 3 parts, at least in its current architecture. The first part is the core module. So this is really where all the UI components are. It's also where all the styling primitives are. So this allows us to properly theme between the old UI and the new UI. There is the second part, which is int UI, which is the standalone theme. So if you are building a desktop application outside of IntelliJ or Android Studio, you can actually use this directly because there's not a great desktop UI toolkit right now. And then the third piece, which is a bigger piece that Seb will demo soon, is the swing bridge. And so this allows us to actually properly bridge the old styles with the new styles. And so this handles the theming where if you're using Joule within the IDE, then you can, if the user switches different themes, then all the components will switch accordingly based on what's already in the IntelliJ platform. And with that, I will hand it to Seb.
Yeah, so as Chris has mentioned, running in the IDE requires some trickery. Specifically, he has mentioned the bridge. The bridge is a piece of software that we have built that is in charge of taking attributes, theming attributes, values, and properties from the swing look and feel and bring them to the Compose components that we have in Joule. How does it work? Well, it's not that easy. There's a lot of reverse engineering, and then someone that is familiar with the IntelliJ platform now might say, but you have the source code. I'm like, I know. We need to replicate a lot of the magic that happens in the platform. For example, loading icons, it's a 3 to 4 step process that involves mapping, patching, changing colors, a number of other things. And we have to replicate that on the Compose side as well to match the behavior of the IDE. Of course, we're not insane. We try to reuse as much as possible from the platform without having to re-implement it ourselves. But there's a point to which we can do it. Maybe because the APIs are not available, maybe because what we do at some point diverges from the Swing implementation. Our main goal, though, is the consistency with the Swing UI. Our best case scenario is you're a user, you open the IDE, you're using Compose with Joule, you don't notice. Except you might notice at some point because it will have animations and stuff, but, And the other problem we're facing is that there are specs for int UI, as Chris has outlined, But they tend to be quite different from the actual implementation in Swing in some specific cases, in some minor, some bigger. There's work there on the Swing side going on to make them match, but as it goes today, we need a Swing compat mode that disables a bunch of stuff that we have done, that is to match the specs. But in the IDE, if you were running and matching the specs entirely, then your UI would look weird. Obviously, this is the point where we say Joule is essentially in a very quickly evolving and rapid moving alpha stage right now. We have some experiments running already using it. There are some people from JetBrains that are actually almost ready to ship. But as everything that is in this stage, things will change. APIs might break. So if you go ahead, just expect breaking changes. We've just shipped this weekend a very big refactoring that changed a lot of APIs. Our goal is not to do that every week because it's a lot of work. We're trying to get it right, but there will be other changes going on probably. So there is no API stability guarantee for now. The tooling is also there and not. Obviously, if you're used to using 20-odd years of tooling that has been developed for Swing, the story for Compose multi-platform is not as nice, it's not as consistent. If you're familiar with the tooling that we have for Jetpack Compose on Android, that's amazing, but we don't have the same stuff yet. And of course, because it's still a relatively early stage thing, there are features that are missing. But don't run away with it. It's demo time. Yes.
Sacrificial pizza.
Angry. Okay. So, nope, wrong one. Sorry. Stop running away. This one. I have too many projects open at the same time. So, I'm just quickly going to show you. We don't need that. It's fine. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is something that you can find in the Joule repo. I just have a IDE sample that I've created. It's building a lot of stuff. It's fine. I just changed branch before going on stage. Not a great idea. It does run, though. Maybe. Okay, so we are seeing here a small selection of the components that are implemented right now in Joule. And again, you might notice they look exactly the same as the Swing ones. You should not be able to tell that this is a Joule surface unless I tell you. But for today, what we really want to do is I've built this sample. So this tab is actually done in Swing. So it's the old way of doing UI in the IDE. This took me about 4.5 days to build. I would say 2 of those days were trying to load the image. I've been doing Swing for 5 years, I'll let you know. And I think I'm decently good at that, but I'm not sure this is the right way to do it. And that kind of goes to prove the point of, we can probably do better. We have the list of all the Android Studio releases here, and we can also switch and look at the Android releases, in case you want to. But you can also observe some really nice SVG. I swear that's an SVG. Again, I'm not sure why it does that. But I didn't have time to debug it properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement the same thing in Compose in hopefully a little over 10 minutes. Don't take the time, please. So where we start from, we just uncomment this code here that adds a new tab to our tool window. And then we go here and we just start coding. Now, this is a normal composable. The composable here represents the entirety of the tab contents. And you will notice that we have the bridge. Now, this is just a theme. It works like any other theme that you're used to in Compose. So now what we need to do is to just start writing some code. Obviously, if we look at the Swing example, there's a split component. Oh, look at that, so smooth. And I've just implemented the same thing in Compose. We have a horizontal split layout component, and if I run this, maybe, see, did it like the pizza? Yes, it did. Okay, perfect. So now we have a very unexciting red box, blue box, but it does what you'd expect it to do. That's cool, but it's not particularly interesting. So let's start writing our code. We have the left column and we have the right column. We're going to implement them both. So it's just some boilerplate creating a left column and a right column. And now I want to actually use them. So I am just going to call the left column composable there. And then get started with the actual implementation. So in the IntelliJ platform, you don't have view models. You might be used to view models on the Android platform. There is, however, something that is fairly similar, which is the concept of service, which is a longer-lived component that is decoupled from the UI it's running on. In this case, we're using a service to hold a global state for the tab. It contains the data source. It does a number of things that we'll see later. Just know it's a long-lived component that holds the data. Because this is Compose, obviously the data and the state, the global state are held outside of the composition, outside of our UI code. So the first thing we want to do is we want to write the filter, obviously, in the right place. Now, the filter, if we look at the swing example, is this row here. So this contains a label, it contains a text field that we can use to filter the contents of the list, and then it contains this action here to show the menu. The way we have implemented that is we have a row, unsurprisingly, that contains text, a spacer. The text comes from Jewel, but it looks exactly the same as the material one. And then we have a search bar and an overflow menu. I'm going to skip the overflow menu because it's a menu that shows up. The more interesting part is the search bar. Again, you can see that the search bar has a text field. A text field is the same thing as an edit text in material, but we're using names that are closer to the swing components because people that are going to use this probably are more familiar with those. The API, however, looks almost identical to the material one. There's some very minor differences here and there. Okay, so now we have written that, and I guess we need to use it. And then I pass in the service and the content source. I run again. And there you go. We have our list. Well, we have our filter, but the list is not there. This is not particularly interesting yet, still. But at least we have the row. Actually, I'm going to show you. Menu is there. It's fine. But we need to show stuff in the list underneath it. So now this is a column. So I am going to add something underneath the filter row. So I'm going to add, actually, no. I'm going to add a list directly here. And you will notice that the list we have is a selectable lazy column. So you're probably familiar with the lazy column. The main difference between a lazy column and a selectable lazy column is that in a selectable lazy columns, the items can be selected. You will have noticed that lists in the IDE, you can select the rows, and that's what this component provides on top of what the lazy column does in Compose Foundation. And then the API, again, it looks pretty much the same as you would expect. So now if I run this, and I haven't broken anything yet, yeah, we have the list of all our code there. And I have my filtering set up, so I can just type something, and it does the filtering. I can also clear. Yeah, that works as expected. I think I can also switch, yeah, to the Android releases. That's fine. That was easy. Now, that doesn't look very good. So let's do something better. Let's create the content for the list items. So we have created a content item row, which is the item layout. It's a row that takes some text, takes an item and it displays the text, and then it has a tag. Now, because I have different types of content, I have a when to choose which part of the data and which colors I want to use, but it's still fairly obvious. And the item tag is just a text with a padding in the background, nothing too crazy. One thing, though, that we couldn't really do in Swing, besides the fact that this text is not supposed to be white, but I don't know how to change it. I mean, I am setting the right text color, but Swing knows better than me, so it's overriding it, of course. But also, I wanted to make this clickable, and you cannot really do that in Swing because these are essentially pre-rendered bitmaps. They're not interactive. You cannot have interactive stuff there. In Compose, however, we don't have that problem. So what I can do is I can say I want to make this clickable by adding, surprise, an on-click modifier. And here we have item, dot, and then depending on which one we're looking at, so this is the API level, string, thank you. And then the other one, I have the channel, and then the name and lowercase. Okay, just by doing that, oh no, I forgot to use it. I always forget to use it. The magic of live demos. So I have the, which is down here. 1 second, sorry. I kind of lost my, there it is. So I just replaced this text with a content item row and pass it the item. And then I pass the state. This is an API that is going to change soon enough, but right now you have to pass the selected and active state and manage the background by yourself. We're going to take care of that at some point down the line. And then the last thing here, this is the callback for when something is selected. So what I want to do is on selected item change. No, wait. Oh, my bad. This is the wrong place. I'm going to take the service. I'm going to pass it the filter content. Perfect. OK, yes. So this is what the lambda that will be triggered when someone clicks the tags. And now, yeah, text color. It works. I can actually click things, and it doesn't do anything. I broke something. Let's pretend it works. It always does work. I forgot something, I'm sure. Anyway, trust me, it does work. I'll show you later if you want. OK, now, oh, yeah, that's the thing that is missing. That would explain. I'm just going to do it on one. The other one, you can imagine it does the same thing. But I've done it on the wrong one, of course.
It's APIs.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yay, magic. OK, perfect. Now, we have done the left column, and we can move on to the right column. Perfect. So we start with the content. The content of the right column are fairly straightforward. We have a box at the top level because we want, in case there's no selected item, to show an empty state here. And otherwise, we have a container, a column that has scroll bar. And in the content, there is a box right now where the image would go, but I will just go ahead and replace it immediately with an image because I don't like the looks of it. OK, I have my image composable here, and then I just replace it here. OK. Now running this. Yes, I should have actually called that composable. OK, now it should work. OK, yeah, the image is there. And bonus points for not looking like a pixelated mess. And then the last thing we need to do is showing some text underneath it. That's kind of a boring bit. It's just like text, 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 text. So I'm just going to be very quick at that. So down here, the right column, and then I need to add the details here. So I'm just going to add the details. You can see it's just text with label, and text with label is a row with 2 texts. A lot of interesting code going on there. But then I just invoke it here. And then it's a selected item. And now if I run it, yay, it works. So you can see now this looks very quickly implemented, but it looks pretty much the same as the Swing version. To write the compose version of this, it took me about 2 days, but I also had to fix a number of my own bugs in the Joule code. So probably if I didn't have those bugs, I could get it done in half a day to a day. So obviously that makes a huge difference in terms of productivity. Over the top? Over the top. Okay, fine.
That's why I'm here.
I need manager approval for this. Okay, so let's do something you cannot do in Swing at all. Let's add a GPU shader to this, because we can. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when the user hovers one of the images, it shows, you know the Pokemon trading cards that are the laminated ones that have that shiny effect? That. Again, because why not? So what we do is we have the same animation API that you're familiar with. It's just an infinite transition that is going to make the card, the image, move slightly to the side so it shines better. And then we have something that is storing the hovered state, animations going in and out of that state. I'm saying a lot of things that you really cannot do in Swing. I know it might be hard to appreciate, but this is unthinkable. And now I have a modifier that just applies a shader to the image. So whenever I select something, ooh. Okay, so let's go back to Keynote.
Thanks. I'll be sure to add shaders to the spec next time.
Thank you.
So looking forward for Joule. So I think what we're initially doing is we are trying to pilot this with a couple of teams. Like he had said, the API isn't quite stable yet, but we do need teams to actually try this to help us find bugs, but also figure out what's missing. So on the IntelliJ side, the package search team is building their current plugin with Compose or with Joule, and this is a latest screenshot from their build. Another team, so coincidentally, Seb and I both work on StudioBot. This is a very new feature, and the timeline is fully custom, and right now it's actually built in Swing, but we're hoping that we will build it in Compose, or sorry, with Joule very soon.
I started already.
Oh, right.
So.
And this one actually is an interesting example because the code editor is, we cannot build that in Compose right now. It's actually fully built in Swing. It's the IntelliJ editor. So it's a good case study for interop. So a lot of the timeline is in Compose, but then the certain parts like the editor are actually in Swing. So you can actually intermix and migrate slowly too, which is good for us. And then the third one, this is an old mockup, but we are doing some redesign in the Android profilers. But when the team decided to do the redesign, a lot of it is already custom UI, and so they thought that Compose would be a better candidate to use than continuing to use Swing. And so they're the other pilot team that we also have. And so, as I said, we're piloting this across several teams with JetBrains and Google. But at the same time, we are also working with the IntelliJ platform team. So the thing is, like with Joule and with Compose, there's different versions, including Kotlin itself. And so we want to make sure that it's already in the platform, and I think this is actually the most important piece for third-party developers like yourselves, because if you do want to use Joule, I think right now you can add it to your plugin, but then because it's not in the platform, it will add, a pretty big chunk to your plugin size. It might end up being 100 megabytes. But if it's in the platform, then you could just use it in the future directly, and then your plugin should only be maybe 4 megabytes, at least when it starts. So that's what we're hoping to do. And so I think to that end, we would recommend maybe holding off on using it for building plugins just now. But if you do want to use Joule for standalone desktop apps, feel free to do so. But with that, we are trying to stabilize the API. And like we said, the catalog itself, we think we have all the components. I think there's a couple we do know we're missing. We're missing combo box and table. But we would like to build those as well. There's also going to be bugs as the IntelliJ and Android Studio teams try to use Compose. And so we'll focus on all of that, trying to get to V1. And so if you do want to use Joule for standalone, like we said, it's all on GitHub. It's in the open, so the sample that Seb showed should be in there.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So you can also get the shader code if you want.
The important part.
Important part. And we do have a public channel on Kotlin Lang for Joule specifically. So if you do have any questions about how to use it in your apps, feel free to post things there. We'd be very happy to see people build stuff and share things. So yeah, you'll find us there as well. And I think kind of stepping back, like, why are we really doing this? We're not just doing it because, Compose is cool. We really believe that, like, we want our developers to be productive. We want them to have a great experience. And we think, with the modern language and ecosystem, they will get that. We also hope with that, we can iterate faster, we can debug things faster. And then, as you saw with shaders, we can also produce higher quality UI and higher fidelity UI, so we can have animations, shaders, more complex layout, more interactions. And ultimately, that's to make a better developer experience for all of you who are using our tools. And so we think these things go hand in hand, and we're not just doing it just because we can do it. And with that, that is all.